Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about percents that are less than 1%. We have been focusing on percents that have always been greater than 1%. Now we're going to be talking about fractions and decimals within a percent. So I just want to talk about something very quickly before we move on here. You don't need to write this down just yet, but this right here is called a decimal. This is called a percent. Yes, it is a decimal within a percent, but technically it is called a percent. That is the most specific name you can call that. Same thing here, that this would be called a fraction, but this would be called a percent. And these are not equal to each other. 3/10 is not equivalent, like my knot will show up there, is not equivalent to 3/10%. Just like 1/4 is not equivalent to 1/4%. They mean something completely different. So what I would like you to copy down is this right here, because we're going to be moving into this in a couple minutes. I would like you to copy down that if I was to give you 1/2%, if I wanted to rewrite this number without the percent sign and I wanted to write it as a fraction, you don't just say, oh, well, 1/2, that's already a fraction, I'm done. You have to remove the 100. Or the percent sign. And to remove the percent sign, you have to divide by 100. So I'm going to rewrite this as 1/2 all divided by 100. And then I have a complex fraction. Two ways that I can cancel this out. I can either rewrite this as 1/2 times the reciprocal of 100 first, which would be 1/100th, or I can multiply by the LCM of the denominators. And if I multiply by 2, these cancel out. I'm left with 1/200th. So to be clear, 0.5% is the same thing as 1/200th. So the other thing that I would like to show you is what they have in the key concept here. That a percent less than 1, let's just say 1, not on, a percent less than 1 describes a very small amount of something, very, very tiny amount. So let's say that you have $1,000. 100% of $1,000 is the $1,000. Now let's say that you have $1,000 and you want to put 10% of that $1,000 away. 10% would be 100. If you now wanted to take and save 1% of your $1,000, that would be $10. Because to find 1% of a number, you move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So to find 1%, the answer is 10. And then $1 is 1/10% of 1,000. So if you're talking about $1,000 bills, one single dollar bill is 1/10%. So that is a very small amount, okay, as compared to the rest of the $1,000. So for example number 1, they want us to put these numbers in the appropriate column. Either these fractions, decimals, percents are equivalent to 0.5% or they're not equivalent to 0.5%. So before we just start moving along and saying 1/2 is equal to 0.5%, we've already figured out up on the top here that 0.5% is equivalent to 1/200th. I've already done that for you. What I'd like to do though here is I'd like to rewrite 1/2%. And I'm now going to change that fraction in the percent to a decimal. So I'm going to rewrite 1/2 as the common decimal 5/10. And I have not done anything yet to get rid of the percent sign, so it's still a percent. To get rid of the percent sign, though, now I'm going to divide by 100. And if I take 5/10 and divide it by 100, I now have a fraction, and I can't have a decimal within that fraction. So I'm going to multiply the top by 10 and the bottom by 10. So that will give me 5/1,000. And 5/1000 at the end of the day does reduce down to 1/200th. So right now, I have written this percent as a fraction. I have still not yet written it as a decimal. So looking through, 1/2% is not equivalent to half of something. 1/2% of 1,000 would be much different than half of $1,000. Half of $1,000 is 500. 1/2 of a percent would be a very small amount. So 1/2 is definitely not equivalent to 1/2. 5/10 is another way to write 1/2. That is not equivalent to 1/2%. The only one that we have not done, I guess, technically, is figured out what 5/10% as a decimal. If I take 5/10% and I divide it by 100, I'm moving that decimal 2 places to the right. So it's also equivalent to, so 5 thousandths is a 1/2% equivalent to that. So we have already figured out that 1/2% is equal to 1/200th, which is also equal to 5/10%. And we just calculated it out to be 5 thousandths. So that would mean that it's not equal to a half, it's not equal to 5/10, it's not equal to 50%, it's not equal to 1/50th, not equal to 5/100ths, or 1/5. So what I'd like you to do is go on and try number 2. Give that one a shot on your own. Okay, so for number 2, I'm showing my work that 1/4% is the same thing as 25/100ths%, which I then put 25/100ths divided by 100 and rewrote it as a decimal to get me 25/10,000ths. Then I also took 1/4% and I wanted to change it to a fraction, so I took 1/4%, 1/4 divided by 100 to get rid of the percent sign, canceled out by multiplying by 4, and again I get 1/400th. So again, the only one that's equal here will be choice 4. So number 3 is asking, why isn't 1/3% equivalent to 33 3/10%? Well, because 1/3% is equivalent to 3/10%, 3/10 repeating percent, and clearly that number is less than 1, and 33 3/10 repeating, less than 1%. That is is greater than 1%. So there's no way that those two can be equivalent. Okay, so now we're going to go on where it's asking us, it's telling us to calculate percents less than 1 the same way you've calculated the other percents. So I'm showing you an example right here that if they asked you, what is 75/100ths% of 200? Again, the part is the same thing as your is, the whole is the same thing as of. So when it says of 200, that's why that's going in the denominator. What is, that means why I'm looking for the part. I then cross multiply, and that will give me 100n equals 150. Then make sure you divide both sides by 100, and you'll get n is 1 5/10. Again, we've done that, we've practiced that. Now we just have to be careful because we're dealing with decimals. So the next question, number 4, they're asking us to specifically solve these problems. And we're going to go ahead and use a proportion. So when it says blank is 1/4% of 200, I'm going to do my work for this one right here. Of 200 means that number is going to go in the denominator. The blank is means I'm looking for the part. And I've got 1/4%, which I can put as 25/100ths if I wanted to, or you can leave it as 1/4. I don't really have a preference. I'm going to leave it as 1/4 and place this over 100. So you can look at this 2 ways now. To go from 100 to 200, don't you multiply by 2? So to go from 1/4 to our number, I could also multiply by 2. So what's 1/4 times 2? Well, that's equal to 2/4, which reduces down to 1/2, which is also equivalent to 5/10. So my final answer will be 5/10 is equivalent to 1/4%. You also could have written this as 1/4 times 200, where you would have said, okay, 200 divided by 4, cancel that out and gotten 50, and then go through and divide the rest. So I'd like you to go ahead and try the next 2. Show your work right here for that one, and then for the other one, the 15 is blank, I'm going to show my work over here. Okay, so when you come back, that will all be done. So the great thing about percents is that it can be solved many different ways, and then the bad thing about percents is that it can be solved many different ways. So it makes it difficult if you're having trouble trying to find your mistakes. So I just went through and set up proportions for both of them. For the 15 is 1 5/10% of 1,000. I have my proportion. And I noticed that to go from 1,000 to 100, I would divide by 10. So I also divided my denominator or my numerator of 15 by 10 to get my answer of 1 5/10. You certainly could go through, though, and do your cross multiplication. For 4 is 5/10% of 800. I did the same thing here, set up my proportion, then I wrote my equation and divided it out. You are allowed to use calculators, just want to remind you of that. So for number 5, go ahead, give that one a shot. Okay, so on this one, I've got 1/5 divided by 100 equals x divided by 2,400 because it says of 2,400, so I know that number goes in the denominator. I'm then multiplying 1/5 times 2,400, and I noticed right here that I can go ahead and cross cancel. So 2,400 divided by 5 will give me 480. I rewrote my equation, 480 equals 100x, then divide both sides by 100 to get 4 8/10. Number 6, I will do this one with you because this one doesn't have questions just as simple as is and of. They are now saying what percent of West Virginia's total area is covered by bodies of water. So this one is, I'm more thinking of a part and whole. Since it's asking what percent, I definitely know that I don't know my percent. What percent of West Virginia's total area is covered by the bodies of water? So the total area, that definitely sounds like that's going to be my original. The total area is the whole amount, the whole land of West Virginia. And then the bodies of water that cover it are roughly 145. So my part divided by the whole. So part divided by the whole. That's how I knew to set that one up. So the tricky part with the percent questions is really either setting up the proportion or setting up your y equals mx. After that point, hopefully we should be able to solve them all correctly, because it's just calculator work. So I have 24,231 times x equals 14,500. Divide both of those numbers by 24,231 because I want to isolate the variable. Make sure you put the 14,500 in your calculator first and then divide that, and you will now get your answer of 6/10, and it is 6/10%. Because I included this 100 in the proportion for talking about a number being out of 100, I can include the percent sign. Go ahead and work on number 7. Because this one said about, I am putting in my answer as approximately 4/10%. Most likely on the test, it will be saying to you where they would like you to be rounding this question, so make sure you're being careful when you are rounding these. Okay, we will be working on practice 6-4 tomorrow. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me. Have a great evening.